they will sometimes achieve at the cost, let's say, of elegance, at the cost of, they'll muss their hair up, if you will. They'll lose, this note will not have quite the sheen that it might have had, but the piece has a thrust.
When they get out in public performance, there is a freshness about it and an excitement about it that makes it a very unique experience.
Sometimes they get so serious that something has to be done to lighten them up a little bit.
The gestures that they make are large musical gestures, certainly very well planned and well thought out, but dramatic and exciting.
They have this incredible style that's all their own, that comes from all four players, but it hits somewhere about 10 feet out and says Cleveland Quartet.
They are obviously among the very handful of top ensembles, both in terms of their performance and in terms of their recognition. I think that's also important. There are a great many marvelous young string quartets, due to a few quartets of which the Cleveland is one. Quartets that showed that not only you could have a marvelous performing mechanism here, but that you could make a living at it, that you could really have a quartet and find audiences. So the whole, which one came first, who knows? But the fact is that you have a new audience for chamber music that didn't exist 15 years ago, a new excitement about chamber music, a new willingness to accept chamber music. When I came to WQXR, chamber music was one of those very specialized connoisseur-type words. Oh yes, chamber music, we'll put that over in this little corner here where nobody will mind. And leader we'll put over in this little corner where nobody will mind. Well, leader is still there, pretty much. But chamber music, no longer. That's in the mainstream now.
Music in general and string quartet playing in particular is almost everything to me. That's my life. It's, since I was a teenager, I've just been totally absorbed and involved and in love with everything to do with it. It's, to me, it gives fulfillment to my life. It gives purpose to my life.
It started back to those days when I used to hear these quartets, these great quartets playing. I somehow saw something there that lit a fire in me. I decided at that point I wanted to become a musician. That was the first thing, because string quartets somehow inspired me to the art of music, to the beauty of music. And I decided I was about 11 years old, and I decided that's for me.
Playing some of the very best music that has been written for any medium. And this is a wonderful, challenging, and inspiring experience, especially to try to communicate this music.
You can achieve sometimes so pure a sound if the balance is right and the intonation is right. If the sound that each one produce is even, such a pure sound that you almost imagine as if the overtone of the chord that the quartet is producing, as if the overtones are somewhere making love in the sky or something like this.
The interplay of four musicians, the ability not only to explore the music and to make that kind of very interesting statement that shows there is still some invention going on. In other words, I think the kind of quartet performance that you least appreciate from a top-ranking quartet is one that sounds like they're doing the 75th repeat of the same program. There has to be something fresh and something unusual that takes place at each occasion. This is what this quartet does especially well.
I think the real interest in chamber music came about sort of simultaneously with the Vietnam War. It goes back now 10 or 15 years when this snowballing of interest in what we do sort of began. I have some personal theories about it. I think it has something to do with the need for sincere and personal types of experiences that the college generation during those years was particularly looking for.
People say that the best repertoire, or musical repertoire, is in the string quartets. Of course, I would say that it is true, but you know, when I listen to the Third Symphony of Mahler, I think this is the best music that one can really dream about. For me, the thing is that a Third Symphony of Mahler, there are so many people involved, and if one of those is not really at his best, the symphony not always suffers as much as a quartet. If someone is playing out of tune or someone is not in his best form. And I think this is the reason why many composers really attacked this string quartet medium and rendered it the kind of the top of their creativity or the deepest, because it's really a kind of combination between the capacity of the individual and also the standard of teamwork, and I don't think you can have a more beautiful combination than this.
When this school was opened in 1921, George Eastman gave
interview with the New York Times in which he said it was just vital for the future of music in the United States that we attain a larger audience for good music of all kinds. I certainly see the public for good music growing, and I see the chamber music program and the Cleveland Quartet playing a major role in that growth over the years ahead. I think the quality of string playing in the Eastman School has been enhanced markedly in the course of the last 7 or 8 years. We have a wonderful string faculty, but I think that the Cleveland Quartet has played a very vital and central role in the improvement of our string performance during that period.
Open it up even more.
In the period 1974-1975, my colleagues and I were involved in a search, an international search, for the best string quartet we could find. The Cleveland Quartet was, and is, even more so in the meantime, a first-rate ensemble, deeply committed to teaching, vibrant and articulate as human beings, and committed to the future of music and to larger issues involving the future of music in America.
It is with great pleasure that we welcome you to the listening room. It is with enormous delight that I tell you that the Cleveland Quartet is back with us. One of the nice things about the Cleveland Quartet, among many others, is that when we did our first broadcast, they were sort of, as we were getting started with the show, they were getting started with their careers, and they hadn't made recordings, and so they came and they played for us in the studio. And I remember when they signed their contract with RCA, I say, uh-oh, here it goes. Once they've got records, they're never going to come and play live again. And they said, no, 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 we will. But still, with us, they are this morning, and they're going to play for us. And I'm delighted that it's a work that they have not yet put on disc, the Ravel Quartet. Meanwhile, Cleveland Quartet, Donald Weilerstein, Peter Salaff, the violinists. Welcome especially to violist Atar Arad, joining us for the first time, and cellist Paul Katz. Here's the Ravel.
It's an incredible homogeneity that is very beautiful, and I can see why many composers have chosen this medium. At the same time, you have the timbre, the deepness of the depth of the cello, the darkness, the soulful quality of the viola, and the beautiful sound of the violins that actually approach the sound of the human voice. There's something so very beautiful about this, the fact that we're all making the sound, touching the strings with our fingers. To bring the meaning that that composer had, that meaning of the totality of a composition, seen through the eyes of 4 people, but somehow at many times becoming one. We have to merge. We have to become, at many times, one person doing something together. At the same time, we mustn't lose our own voice, because the composer wrote this piece for 4 instruments. He wanted the personality of each instrument, of each voice to be alive at the same time. Being 4 different human beings, our response to the score is often different. This creates a difference of opinion that we have to resolve, again, in a community, a democracy. At times we have to try many different ideas to decide which one at that particular time in our lives is going to work the best for the 4 of us.
My ear should be a bit more. I think Peter should play a little more. I thought you were still more than he was. Okay, and I really don't hear it.
And you have a 4th, but he has a sort of a warm chord in the middle, I think. But although I can hear it the way you're doing it.
2 of them together make a chord, right? It should be a balanced sound between the 2 of them.
I know why he's...
I don't feel an active moment here. If we can just keep it quiet, that's all. I'll play louder and fuller and more.
When you listen to the Cleveland Quartet, you are hearing 4 very individual performers who have blended their styles in a very vigorous fashion, and who have, as all major ensembles must, explored every detail of interpretation.
The fact that there's a great admiration for one another, I think, is terribly important. We all admire each other, I think, as people and as musicians. And that element is so terribly important to a quartet. We don't always agree on a phrase, how to make a phrase, or how to play something. But that creates a little bit more excitement and a little more dynamism, because we have to work out, it's almost as if we're giving birth to a musical composition, going through pain and struggle at times. And when we get on the stage and things happen and they work, and we feel that the audience has been touched, then we know that struggle and that somehow that effort and the sweat and those hours have really been meaningful.
In this profession, you're making commitments for ensembles and for solo artists a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years in advance. And along with this comes the allocation of time for the United States, Canada, the European tour, maybe the Far Eastern tour, other commitments. Having put together the artistic and the physical elements of the tour, you then involve yourself with getting the programs out to local sponsors, getting the publicity material out to local sponsors, which takes mutual preparation. The logistical portion of it, and we have a complete department here that does nothing but programming and travel. A little bit more difficult for a quartet because you're not only handling 4 individuals, there is the logistical problem of Mr. Cello, who on an airplane buys an extra seat, and who is a little bit more cumbersome than some of his fellow strings.
That business with the cello in the Vienna airport, I tell you, I think the cellist in a string quartet deserves an extra 5% of the fee, you know, for all that one has to go through. It was so typical, you know, arriving there and having this woman look me straight in the eye and say, first of all, that there was no reservation for the cello. Then I think she found a reservation for the cello, and so the cello could go, but then I couldn't go. She couldn't find a reservation for me. And then finally we solved the whole problem.
Wonderful. I booked under cello.
This business of going through airport security, I think it's one of the great traumas for me of traveling in a foreign country, because if I don't know a language well enough to explain what's in this cello case, and people just don't realize the delicacy of the instrument, the historic value, they don't know what they're handling. And they open a case and they stick their fingers in there and they start messing around, you know, with a Stradivarius, and it's really frightening. When the quartet was first formed, there was an excitement about a trip to Europe or South America or whatever it was. There still is, but in those days, I used to take out the history of Germany or something like that and read up a little bit on the places that we were going. I would be aware of some of the important architectural places or museums to see or visit. Here I arrived in Dubrovnik, not the faintest idea about the history of the city. Here was this fantastic walled city we're walking around. I've got no idea whether it was built in the 3rd century or the 13th. There just wasn't time.
I feel that we don't see a lot of the cities that we are visiting. And sometimes I wish there will be something in the tour which will give us time to
to see more, though I'm sure that Dan and Peter and Paul, and maybe me too, we would use it for a rehearsal. But for me, Dubrovnik was a bit different, and this was one of the pleasantest times in the tour, because we had one day and each one could do whatever one wants. And I prefer to, to lay in the beach and profit from the sun. For me, Dubrovnik is something else, because I'm more a seaman than a mountain man. So I was just trying to have the most I can, profit from the sea.
Because I'm going to get my shoes wet.
Sure. But I need a wave.
In this jet-setting age of flying from one concert to the next, and when we're home, we're flying from rehearsal to teaching to this and that. I mean, we never see each other. We never can sit down in a relaxed, comfortable atmosphere and discuss anything except the next crisis in our lives somehow. And these train rides in Europe, I think over the years, have been very valuable for the quartet. We have a couple of hours to just sit and, I don't know, whether we talk about politics or philosophy or music or whatever it is, it's just been almost a time to get to know each other once again.
I suppose I'm the type of musician who likes to squeeze out as much practice time as possible. I even practice on trains sometimes. And there's actually quite a debate within the quartet about whether to rehearse right before a concert or not. It's a very kind of intense time for us. The adrenaline is building up. We're getting ready for that performance.
I guess I'm one of those that feels it's very important to play together whenever possible, immediately before the concert. It's been my perception anyway, maybe it's an inaccurate one, that if we don't go out on stage, let's say at 7 o'clock for an 8 o'clock performance and sit down for 15 or 20 minutes, that somehow intuitively we're not on the same wavelength, that we need that time playing 15, 20 minutes together to sort of, for the antenna to get out and we get tuned into each other. And then somehow the beginning of the concert goes. And now it's a real problem because we are nervous.
What is the order of the program?
Here's the program.
A minor, B flat, C minor?
That's what I think. That's what I think we suggest. It was great to be in Salzburg. It's Edinburgh and Salzburg, of course, are the two most important festivals of Europe. It's a beautiful city, the birthplace of Mozart. And for me, it was really a chance to walk around, relax a little bit, and to see this musically famous city finally for the first time. It was nice that we were playing in Heidelberg on this summer tour because the Eastman Philharmonia is the resident orchestra for the Heidelberg Festival. And David Efron, who's a marvelous conductor and on the faculty at Eastman, and the orchestra were there for the summer. A lot of our students were there, and of course,
coming to play for our students. Everybody gets a little bit nervous, so the tension was up. But we arrived at this most incredibly beautiful ruin, this medieval castle in Heidelberg. It was a magnificent place. It was just a beautiful setting for a concert. But nobody could feel their fingers. It was too cold, too windy, and too dark. So they took it inside and we played there.
Edinburgh is one of the places that I like most. Like London, is one of those cities that every corner might contain a secret to be discovered.
You remember these the two geishas?
Remember more than two.
And then that we were switching.
Nobody would believe it anyway, so don't tell the story. It is interesting, actually, as you go around the world, each country, the audience of each country has its own personality. In Japan, the most striking thing is the lack of response. We played the first piece, and it's a very kind of polite applause that just barely gets you off stage, and that's about it. And the second half the same way, and then when the concert ended, all of a sudden, cheers and applause and the whole thing. And it's almost, I guess this is the way they react. They're digesting the whole evening. In a way, one gets the feeling that the Japanese audience almost is embarrassed to interrupt you, if they don't want to interfere with what you're doing.
When we're on tour, we often try to spend some time hearing young quartets. It's really a very enriching and broadening experience for all of us. It gives us kind of a break from our very intense performing schedule, and it gives us an opportunity to pass on things we've picked up in our years together. And it's really incredible how technically accomplished some of these young people are in Japan.
A bit more sense of conversation. For example, in the second movement, where the music goes from one voice to the other voice, is if somehow you could almost speak to each other with your instruments a little bit more.
Good morning, everyone. This is today, Tuesday, the 15th day of December, and for those of you deep in the snow and frost belt this morning, eat your heart out. Those are scenes from Honolulu, Hawaii.
And then live in this half hour, 4 of the world's most famous musicians, the Cleveland Quartet. The Cleveland Quartet, one of the great ensembles of the world, was formed in 1969. The members are Donald Weilerstein, Peter Salaff, Atar Arad, and Paul Katz, the cellist. Morning, gentlemen. We're really pleased to have you here this morning. We're in a big rush, I know. But I must know the source of these instruments. These are the Paganini Stradivarius instruments, and they are priceless. Where are they from?
Well, they were owned by Paganini, the 4 of these instruments. He played them in the 1830s. They were all made about a century before, and they're presently owned by the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C. that's lent them to us.
It's unusual for a museum to let its priceless instruments out of its own glass cases, isn't it?
They realize that these instruments die if they're not played, and they've taken a very wonderful attitude in making them available to contemporary musicians.
We are now going to listen to music by the Cleveland Quartet, the final movement of the Ravel Quartet, very agitated music. Gentlemen?
The democracy really started right at the beginning. Don Weilerstein called his old friend Peter, someone he'd known for years. He had just finished in the Peace Corps in Chile and was in Puerto Rico. And he invited Peter to come to Cleveland, where Donald was teaching at the Cleveland Institute of Music. Martha and Paul Katz, they had been married about 2 years at that time, were living in Toledo, working at the university. And Peter was to come to Cleveland and to play with the three of them. And it was determined that they would use our living room as the base for their first get-together. Now, the quartet had auditioned and interviewed others for Peter's position, but it seemed that a match was really made on that particular evening, something that my wife and children, I know, will never forget.
I knew there was a need in Cleveland for a string quartet, and I knew at that point in my career I would like to try to form one. And so I discussed it with them, and they were interested in the idea if the right kind of job could be found for us. So I tried to find the money and the right kind of job in Cleveland, and Cleveland Institute was very interested. Victor Babin heard us, and he thought also the quartet had a really good potential, and he gave us a job.
Martha and I met as students in a student chamber music group at the Manhattan School of Music back in the 60s. And we were playing chamber music together before we ever dated. I imagine that's one reason that it worked so well for us. It wasn't as though we first became married and then tried to form a string quartet and learn how to work together. During the first summer when we were at Marlborough and we were forming this group, some very important musicians came to us and said, you know, the Cleveland Quartet sounds wonderful, and we think you have a wonderful future, et cetera, but really don't try and form a string quartet with your wife. It'll just never work. And of course, that we didn't feel that. It just wasn't the case with us. We had 11 wonderful years together in the quartet. We traveled the world together. We made our careers. We made music together, all of that type of thing. It was a very close kind of personal experience. To Martha, a home and a family and roots and all of that sort of thing is very, very important. And that's why when we did decide to have a child, we knew that at some point Martha would leave the quartet.
We did an interview from Aspen a couple of seasons back when Atar had just joined the group. We did it actually, it was with you, Peter, wasn't it?
Paul and myself.
Yes, you and Paul. And we talked, Atar, you weren't there, but we talked about you at great length.
Sure. Happily, I was not there.
Yeah, and about what sort of a person they were looking for and how thrilled they were to have found you. What sort of an experience was it for you to come in to a quartet that had been ongoing and had been building its own personality for so long?
Say it was a good experience.
Yeah, it was a good experience.
No, Paul, seriously, what was it that you were seeking in the new player, and how long did it take really to settle into where it is now?
Well, what we were looking for, first of all, was a first-class instrumentalist, and we were looking for somebody that had his own personality and a communicative gift. Mm-hmm. And I think we definitely found that in Atar. We had a chance to tour with Adi as a substitute to Martha even before she had made a decision to leave the quartet, and during that time we became good friends, and we knew that we would be able to get along on a personal basis.
After leaving the Cleveland Institute of Music, we went to Buffalo. In order to go to Buffalo, this is a state university in New York at Buffalo, we had to compete with several other quartets from other parts of the world. And we were, so to speak, elected or desired by the student body and the faculty there at the time. And the major project for us there was to follow in the footsteps of the Budapest Quartet in the performance of the Beethoven, the complete Beethoven cycle. After being there for 5 years, we went to the Eastman School of Music. We were again invited to leave our job in Buffalo, and we are very happy to be at the Eastman School of Music, a wonderful school.
They're very intense. When they get in the studio, they may have played a work many times in concert, but it seems as though they're approaching it almost as if from the first time. And I guess because they feel as though they're committing it for repeated scrutiny by a record-buying public and by themselves as well.
When we're recording with a great pianist like Emanuel Ax, it's a great joy. Working with a guest artist gives us a type of spontaneity that we strive for in a recording session.
They do a great deal of rehearsing in the studio. In fact, strangers would walk in and their reaction might be, haven't they ever played this thing before, or do they know each other? Because they spend such a great deal of time working on little details. And I guess for a string quartet, that really is important. I think that the pace is slow for a guest artist working with the quartet, particularly a pianist.
When Peter plays on top, he has... I think this belongs to the...
How long is that last? How much control do you have over balance?
We'll have no control over balance.
You have no control over
Keep
balance.
it dry, but make it just that much more spacey. A little bit.
I just want to hear this area.
It doesn't have material enough, the sound of the strings.
If you want my opinion, I say we leave it and just play well.
Yeah, I came to Aspen first many years ago, and this dates back, must be talking back about 25 years ago. And at that time I met Don, and I remember Aspen as being an incredibly beautiful place. Just looking up the mountains, and it was just breathtaking to see those fantastic green mountains on all sides. I just couldn't believe it. It was an unbelievable thing. There's a certain peacefulness about Aspen, being in one with nature somehow. It's just very conducive to the musical experience, to creativity.
We started coming into Aspen, I believe, when we were in our third year as a quartet. After a number of years when we felt that this really was going to be the summer home of the quartet, we felt it very important for ourselves to develop something very meaningful here in terms of a advanced program or serious program of chamber music. Klaus Adam, of course, as the whole chamber music world knows, is former cellist of the Juilliard Quartet. And he shared the same sort of desire that we did to do something more special in the chamber music program here.
Klaus Adam founded at Aspen the Institute for Advanced Quartet Studies in order to foster the art of string quartet playing in this country today.
That sounds really lovely. Could you, before you play, imagine the sound that you have in your mind? Just listen to be sure the sound has enough substance to it, even if you're playing soft. Too transparent. Yeah, just a little bit more. I mean, if you just try to touch vibrato as you were playing, and the other's playing hardly anything. Just so there's enough substance in the sound, so it has a human quality to it.
For us, one of the unstructured parts of the seminar, but a very important part of the seminar, is just sort of rubbing shoulders in a musical and a social way. You know, the kind of barbecue that we can have where we invite all 5 of these young quartets over, and the Cleveland Quartet's there, and we sit down and sort of 2 of us play here with 3 of them or something such as that, mix it up. It's a bit of a Marlborough-style philosophy, which of course is where the Cleveland Quartet began anyway, but at Marlborough they take young artists and very established artists, everybody comes and plays together in a sort of a spirit of equality. One of the most exciting things for any quartet, refreshing, is to be able to play with guest artists, just so that we get out of ourselves and interact with other musical personalities. And Aspen has given us an opportunity over the last 10 years to play with many of the world's greatest artists. I mean, it's a long, long list. I'm sure I'd leave a lot of very wonderful people off unintentionally. We played with Pinky Zuckerman and Itzhak Perlman and Leonard Rose and Zara Nelsova and Emmanuel Axe and Misha Dichter, and it just goes on, and those kinds of people come through here, and it's wonderful for us. And in addition to that, it gives us a chance, when we want to be able to perform with something like the seminar program with the Chester Quartet, which is a wonderful young quartet that's been training with us. We did the same thing, the Mendelssohn Octet, with the American Quartet that was also in residence here a few years back.
Why don't we just start good. So something. Maybe we can try that. You need some classical also.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking at you.
Sorry, wait, I have Peter Salaff.
Thank you.